My name is Daniel Hartman. For nearly 3 decades, I poured my soul into the same job at Midland Technologies, a manufacturing firm nestled in the heart of Milwaukee. I wasn't a flashy guy, never needed the spotlight. I just wanted to do good work, provide for my family, and maybe, just maybe, retire with a little dignity. It's strange how the rhythm of a life can be dictated by something as mundane as a time card. For 29 years I punched in at 7:45 a.m., grabbed my coffee from the break room, and clocked out at exactly 4:30. I worked through 3 supervisors, 2 warehouse expansions and 1 automation overhaul. Never once called in sick, never once showed up late. That's the kind of guy I was, the kind of guy people relied on until they didn't. The company had changed over the years. When I started back in the 90s, it was family-run, proud of its blue-collar roots. But as time passed, younger executives with fresh MBAs replaced the old guard. Numbers mattered more than people. Efficiency became the buzzword that cut deeper than any pink slip ever could. Still, I kept my head down. I had a countdown app on my phone, marking the days until my 30-year mark. Once I hit that, I'd qualify for full retirement benefits, pension, health coverage, a send-off luncheon with cake and maybe a plaque. I'd earned it, or so I thought. I remember the day everything shifted like it happened 5 minutes ago. It was a Monday morning in late October, the kind of cold that seeps through your bones. I had just walked into the plant, the smell of oil and steel still oddly comforting, when my manager, Brent Maxwell, a guy half my age with a handshake like a limp fish, asked to see me in his office. Brent had joined the company 2 years earlier. Slick haircut, tight suits, always tapping away at his iPad like he was solving world hunger. We never quite clicked. I was old school. He was, well, whatever they call leadership these days. As I stepped into his office, I noticed HR was already there. Angela, the rep, couldn't meet my eyes. That's when my stomach sank. "Daniel," Brent said, folding his hands like he was practicing for a corporate photo shoot, "we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position, effective immediately." I just stared at him. He kept talking. "The company's undergoing restructuring. We're aligning with long-term goals, streamlining departments." All I could think about was my app. 42 days left until I hit 30 years. 42 days. "What about my retirement benefits?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. Brent shifted in his seat. "Since your tenure falls short of the full 30 years, unfortunately, you're not eligible for the pension package. We've arranged a small severance to ease the transition." A small severance, like they were doing me a favor. I felt my body go numb. 29 years and 10 months, boxed up in a manila envelope and handed to me with a pat on the back. Angela finally looked up. Her voice was soft. "We appreciate your service, Daniel, truly. No watch, no luncheon, no thank you card signed by the team." They gave me 15 minutes to clear out my locker. As I walked through the warehouse for the last time, I passed co-workers I'd known for years. Some gave me sympathetic looks. A few couldn't even meet my eyes. I didn't blame them. Loyalty, I realized, was a one-way street in this place. They don't build bridges anymore. They build exits. I packed my things into a small cardboard box, just like you see in movies. A framed photo of my daughter, a pair of worn gloves, and the thermos my wife gave me on our 10th anniversary. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. I just walked out the side door, the cold air slapping me awake. As I sat in my truck staring at the factory building I had called a second home for nearly 3 decades, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just a layoff, it was a betrayal, and as the engine idled and my breath fogged the windshield, I made a promise to myself. They think they've written my ending, but they have no idea what story they've just started. For over 2 decades, I walked the same hallways, drank the same bitter coffee from the break room, and carried the weight of a company that rarely said thank you. It wasn't about praise for me. It never had been. I believed that if you showed up, did your work, and kept your head down, life would reward you eventually. My name is Harold Boone, and I spent 29 years of my life working as a senior facilities coordinator for a logistics company in Midland, Ohio. I started in my early 20s as a janitor with nothing but a GED and a toolbox passed down by my father. I learned to repair heating systems in the winter, cool down overworked server rooms in the summer, and fix just about anything in between. If a pipe burst at 3 a.m., they called me. If the CEO's AC rattled during a meeting, it was me again. I knew the guts of that building better than I knew the inside of my own home. And now, with retirement in sight, just 10 days away, I was holding a manila envelope with my termination papers inside. I still remember the words that came out of Marcus Dean's mouth that morning. Marcus was the new director of operations, fresh out of some Ivy League MBA program, who'd been brought in to streamline the workflow and cut inefficiencies. I was apparently one of those inefficiencies. "It's not personal, Harold," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. "It's a restructuring decision. We appreciate your years of service, not personal." After 29 years, after staying during the pandemic, working overtime when others clocked out early, fixing that burst waterline during Christmas Eve, while his kind were sipping wine by the fire, he slid the papers across the desk like he was handing off a menu at a diner. No warning, no exit interview, no retirement cake or parting words from the people I'd trained. Just an early morning ambush and a folder full of HR legalese. I sat there stunned, my fingers tightening around the envelope, hearing every second tick louder on the wall clock. My retirement pension was supposed to activate in 10 business days. 10. I had been counting them off like a child waiting for summer break. "You do understand," Marcus said, adjusting his watch, "that as you're being let go prior to your retirement date, the pension plan is no longer valid." It was contingent on full tenure. He said it like it was some minor policy detail, not the destruction of nearly 3 decades of sacrifice. I felt the heat rise in my chest, a slow-burning anger pressing against the inside of my ribs. "I gave everything to this place," I finally said, my voice low. "I fixed the roof when the storm tore it off. I worked double shifts when we lost 2 guys in maintenance. I even covered for you when you forgot to authorize payroll last quarter. You think you can erase all that with a pink slip?" Marcus offered a rehearsed sigh. "It's not me, it's the board. We've had to make some difficult calls, but I knew that was a lie. A week earlier, I'd heard whispers about a private meeting Marcus had with the CFO. He'd bragged about cutting costs aggressively to make room in the budget for a new operations software suite, and for bonuses, no doubt." I stood up, the legs of my chair screeching against the tile. "You'll regret this." He blinked. "Excuse me, you may have clipped my wings," I said, eyes locked on his, "but you forgot I built this nest." And with that, I walked out past the cubicles where younger staff avoided eye contact, past the framed Employee of the Month photos where my face had appeared more than once, and out the door of the place I once thought I'd retire from. That day the sky was overcast, and the cold wind stung my cheeks as if to warn me that winter was coming early this year. But beneath that grey horizon, something stirred inside me, not just anger but resolve. They thought I'd quietly disappear, that I'd lick my wounds and fade into obscurity. What they didn't realize was that a man who spent 29 years solving problems knew how to fix broken things, even when that broken thing was a company's moral compass. As I drove home in silence, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what they were about to lose. The drive home felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the thick weight of humiliation, or maybe it was the realization that I had no job to return to the next day. For nearly 3 decades, I had never gone a morning without that purpose. Now I was just another guy behind a steering wheel, wondering what to do with his life. My house sat on a modest cul-de-sac in northern Midland, the kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed every weekend and neighbors waved from driveways without ever really knowing each other. I parked, turned off the ignition, and just sat there, staring at my porch like it belonged to someone else. Inside, my wife Marlene stood at the kitchen counter, rolling out pie crust with the radio humming softly in the background. She looked up and smiled, until she saw my face. "Harold, what's wrong?" I didn't have the words. I sat at the kitchen table, my coat still on, and slid the manila envelope toward her. She read it silently, then read it again. "They fired you," she finally whispered, 10 days before retirement. I nodded. Marlene had seen me through my worst years, early mornings, busted knees, layoffs during recessions, but this was something else. Her lips tightened as she folded the letter. "That's theft," she muttered. "They robbed you. It's legal," I said, "but yeah, that's exactly what it feels like." We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the wind whipped through the bare branches. Leaves danced across the sidewalk like little echoes of the storm building inside me. "Are you going to fight it?" she asked. I stared at the envelope. They've got lawyers, corporate policies, a team of HR people to make sure everything they do is covered in fine print. "But you've got something they don't," she said. "What's that?" "You've got the truth." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, replaying every conversation I'd had with Marcus Dean over the last 2 years. The condescension, the fake compliments, the way he looked at people like they were puzzle pieces to be moved around. Then it hit me. I had the perfect memory, not photographic, but close. I remembered every blueprint, every maintenance report, every incident log I'd submitted over the last decade, and I remembered the time Marcus came to me with an off-the-books request to install new HVAC sensors without going through the compliance department. He said it would save paperwork, told me to forget about logging the upgrade. I hadn't. In fact, I had saved the original request in a folder on my home computer, along with dozens of other little shortcuts he'd asked for. Building code violations, unreported safety hazards, even a contractor invoice that had magically disappeared after a quiet backroom deal with a cousin of his. That night, I dug through my old backups, external hard drives I hadn't touched in years. I found the logs, time-stamped emails, screenshots, handwritten notes I'd scanned and saved, just in case. At the time, I didn't think I'd need them, but instinct is funny like that. I opened a fresh document and began compiling everything. I created a timeline, every corner they'd cut, every policy they'd violated, every time Marcus had said, "Don't worry about the paperwork." By 5 a.m., I had a dossier, and by noon, I had an appointment with Alison Crane, a friend of Marlene's who worked as an independent labor attorney. She listened to everything, asked a few questions, then flipped through the folder I handed her. At one point, she let out a low whistle. "This isn't just a wrongful termination, Harold," she said. "This is fraud, safety violations, falsified reports. If even half of this is verifiable, and it looks like it is, you've got a case, a big one." I leaned back in the chair, feeling the knots in my shoulders start to loosen. "I don't want to just get my pension back," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" "I want them to regret thinking they could toss me out like a busted wrench." Alison smiled. "Then let's get to work." The air outside Alison's law office smelled different than it had earlier that day. Not sweeter, exactly, but sharper, like the way the world smells after a thunderstorm, like something had broken loose. As I walked back to my truck, that old feeling of helplessness, the one that had gripped my chest when Marcus fired me, was gone. I had a plan now, and not just any plan, a slow, legal, surgical strike that would shake Midland logistics to its core. Alison had been direct. "We'll start by filing a grievance with the State Labor Board," she'd explained. "But we won't stop there. The safety violations and manipulated invoices, that's where the real pressure is. If this goes public, it could spark a full federal investigation." She wasn't exaggerating. The maintenance logs I'd saved contained more than just workplace shortcuts. There was a fire alarm system that Marcus had put off repairing, claiming budget constraints while shifting funds to redesign the executive break room. Then there was the time I flagged a gas leak in the backup generator room, only to be told to monitor it quietly so they wouldn't have to report it. Reckless cost-cutting like this, Alison had said, can put lives in danger. That's not a civil issue, that's criminal negligence. I'd always thought of myself as a simple man, not the kind to stir the pot. But now I understood, some pots need stirring, or the whole kitchen burns down. Back home, I dedicated the next several days to reviewing everything. Marlene helped me sift through years of documents, and together we found more red flags, emails with timestamps proving that Marcus had altered safety reports before board reviews. It wasn't just me he had put at risk, it was every worker in that building. Alison filed the paperwork within the week. The Labor Board opened a formal complaint, and OSHA, the federal agency that oversees workplace safety, launched a preliminary investigation into the facility. But I wasn't stopping there. I knew Marcus. He cared about two things, his reputation and his wallet. If either one cracked, he'd panic, and when people like Marcus panic, they make mistakes. So I called in a favor from Victor Hines, an old buddy of mine who ran a regional tradesmen's network online. Victor ran the Union Roots newsletter. Mostly it was a place for guys to swap job postings, share updates on company behavior, and warn about dirty managers. I gave him my story, every word of it. He read it twice, then said, "This'll burn through inboxes faster than a Friday night bonus check." The article went live the next morning. It was titled, "Fired 10 days before retirement. One man's warning about corporate loyalty." It didn't take long to spread. Local newspapers picked it up. A regional business journal called me for a statement, and the comments started pouring in from former employees, other victims of Marcus's restructuring, and a few anonymous workers still inside Midland Logistics who began leaking even more evidence. Turns out, I wasn't the only one with a folder full of secrets. Emails from warehouse supervisors confirming that mandatory safety drills had been skipped. Delivery schedules that violated driver-hour regulations, even one note from an IT manager saying Marcus had instructed him to delete legacy personnel files right before my termination. That one sent Allison into overdrive. "That's destruction of evidence," she said. "We're going for a full whistleblower claim now." Meanwhile, the mood inside Midland Logistics began to shift. I heard from my old co-worker, Jared, who still worked in HVAC. "They've been holding secret meetings every day," he whispered over the phone. "Marcus is losing it. There's talk of an internal audit. HR's scrambling to cover their tracks." "Good," I said. "Let them sweat." I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. Not entirely. I was doing it for every guy who gave his life to a company that saw him as disposable. For every worker whose loyalty was met with silence. For every man who thought he'd earned respect, only to find a locked door where a handshake should have been. This was about justice, and for the first time in a long time, I knew it was coming. 3 weeks into the investigation, the walls of Midland Logistics were starting to tremble. Quietly, then with the unmistakable creak of structural failure. You can only stack so much corruption on top of arrogance before something gives. Allison had been relentless, with the Labour Board now involved and OSHA reviewing the safety complaints. Subpoenas were flying out faster than payroll slips. One by one, the carefully buried secrets of Marcus Dean's leadership began rising from the depths. The most damning discovery came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was sipping lukewarm coffee on the back porch, watching water streak down the railings, when Allison called. Her voice was tight with excitement. "Harold, we've got it." "Got what?" "The audit. The accounting team at Midland tried to bury the facility maintenance budget under a fake operations line. But a whistleblower just handed us internal memos showing Marcus diverted nearly $50,000 over the last year. To where? To a consulting firm registered under his cousin's name in Texas. They billed the company for efficiency analysis that was never delivered. It's embezzlement, Harold. Full stop. My chest tightened, not from stress but from something sharper, satisfaction. It was like finding a crack in a foundation you'd always suspected was weak. Now we had proof. "This goes beyond firing you," Allison continued. "This is criminal. He stole from the company and used your termination to help cover it. Marcus had cut me loose to make room for his dirty money. He thought nobody would look twice at an aging maintenance guy. No one would ask why the budget suddenly had room for mysterious consulting fees, but he'd underestimated the man who knew every inch of that building and every invoice that came through it. By now, word of the investigation had reached the shareholders. Midland Logistics was a privately owned company, but its investors included several state pension funds and a couple high-profile board members who didn't like scandal. One anonymous contact forwarded Allison a screenshot of a company-wide email sent by the CEO. "We are taking these allegations seriously and launching a third-party review." That was corporate speak for "heads are about to roll," and they did. The first to go was Kathy Reynolds, the HR manager who had processed my termination papers. Turns out she'd ignored 2 previous complaints filed by long-time employees who had also been cut just before reaching benefits eligibility. One of them, a janitor named Thomas, had died 6 months after being fired, his widow left with nothing. Then came the suspension of CFO Don Harlow, the man who had greenlit the reallocation of facility funds. His emails with Marcus were riddled with vague terms like strategic disbursement and asset alignment, corporate gibberish meant to hide theft in plain sight. And finally, the board requested Marcus Dean step down pending investigation. It wasn't the perp walk I dreamed of, but it was close. I watched the news report with Marlene on a Friday evening. A local anchor stood outside Midland's headquarters, the grey logo behind her flickering in the dusk. Today, sources confirmed that Midland Logistics Director of Operations, Marcus Dean, has officially resigned amid a growing internal scandal involving financial misconduct and labor violations. Investigations are ongoing, and legal experts predict potential criminal charges may follow. Marlene turned to me, eyes wide. "You really did it." I didn't respond right away. I was still watching the screen. There was something sobering about seeing it all laid bare, all the lies, all the betrayal. The machine that had chewed me up was finally choking on its own gears. "I didn't do it for me," I finally said. "I did it because someone had to." And yet the story wasn't over, because while Marcus had fallen, there was still the matter of what I had lost: my pension, my security, nearly 3 decades of sweat poured into a promise that was snatched away just before the finish line. That part still needed fixing, and I had just the plan. 2 days after Marcus Dean's resignation made the local headlines, I got a call I wasn't expecting, at least not so soon. It was from Elaine Monroe, Midland Logistics in-house legal counsel. She had a voice like polished marble, smooth, hard and cold. "Mr. Boone, I'm reaching out on behalf of the board," she began, formal as a scripted voicemail. "They'd like to discuss a resolution in light of recent events." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Is that right?" I asked, calm as still water. "Funny, nobody wanted to talk when they were kicking me out." "I think you'll find our offer reasonable," she replied. I didn't need to ask what she meant. They were scared. Between the OSHA violations, the stolen funds and the wave of bad press, Midland's leadership wanted this problem me to quietly go away before the feds showed up. Allison, of course, was thrilled. "This is it, Harold. You've got leverage now. But don't accept anything yet, not without seeing the full cards." So we arranged a meeting. Not at their headquarters. I refused to step foot in that building again, but at a neutral office suite downtown. Walking into that glass-walled conference room, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: control. There were 3 suits on the other side of the table: Elaine, a finance director I didn't recognize, and a mediator trying too hard to look neutral. Elaine slid a folder across the table. "We're prepared to offer you a retroactive retirement package, full pension, stock options you were due, and 6 months severance. In exchange, you'll drop the complaint and agree to non-disparagement." Non-disparagement? Corporate speak for stop talking. I didn't even open the folder. "That's a nice start," I said slowly, "but we're not there yet." Elaine's smile tightened. "Mr. Boone, with all due respect." "No," I cut her off. "With all due respect, you're talking to a man who gave nearly 30 years to a company that tossed him aside like a used part. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for fairness, and you folks didn't listen, so I made you listen." I reached into my own folder and pulled out a stack of affidavits, statements from current employees, contractors, even a former board member who'd emailed Allison with concerns. They outlined years of mismanagement, risk and ethical failures. Elaine flipped through them, her face turned ashen. "So here's what we're going to do," I continued. "You'll give me backdated retirement, not from the day I was fired, from the day I was eligible, 10 days after, with full benefits, including the insurance I was owed." Elaine opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm not finished. You'll issue a formal public apology, not buried in a report. I want a signed statement from the board acknowledging wrongful termination and the harm done." She tried to keep her composure. "That's a lot." I leaned forward. "That's justice." There was a long silence. Then the mediator cleared his throat. "Let's take a short recess." In the hallway outside, Allison leaned against the wall and smirked. "You should have been a lawyer, Harold." "Nah," I said. "Too many suits. Not enough screwdrivers." Back inside, they agreed. Every term in writing. When I left that building, the weight I'd been carrying for weeks, no, for years, lifted like dust in the wind. Not because I got even, but because I got heard. Because they had to look me in the eye and admit what they did was wrong. The next day, a press release went out. Midland Logistics acknowledges procedural errors in the handling of former employee Harold Boone's retirement case and offers a formal apology for the oversight. It was sanitized, sure. Corporate language softened the blow, but I didn't need them to grovel. I just needed the world to know I wasn't the man they painted me to be. Disposable, forgotten, weak. I was Harold Boone, and I was done being quiet. A few weeks passed. The headlines moved on. The calls stopped. Midland Logistics was buried beneath a fresh scandal involving its procurement department. And Marcus Dean, rumor had it he'd taken a medical leave and was hiding out in a Scottsdale condo, nursing his bruised ego behind blackout curtains. Good riddance. But me, I was still waking up before dawn, sipping coffee before the birds, and as the quiet settled deeper into my bones, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't done building. One afternoon I stopped by the local trade school, just out of curiosity at first. It was a squat brick building off I-40, the kind you'd miss if you blinked. Inside it smelled like motor oil and sawdust. That old scent, it felt like home. I wandered the halls until I found the machine shop. A dozen young men and women stood in grease-stained aprons around metal lathes and engines. I introduced myself to the instructor, a wiry man named Joe Vickers with forearms like tree trunks and a soft Kentucky drawl. He remembered me from a safety seminar I gave 5 years ago. "You looking to teach?" he asked. "Not sure," I replied. "I just came to see if I still had something useful in me." Joe smiled. "Far as I can tell, you've got more to offer than half the people who walk through that door. These kids don't need someone with a fancy degree. They need someone who knows how to fix things for real and how to fight for themselves when the world tells them they're disposable." The next morning, I came back with a toolbox. I started volunteering twice a week, teaching basic HVAC troubleshooting, how to read electrical panels, how to think on your feet when the equipment fails and management won't pick up the phone. But more than that, I taught them what no one had taught me: document everything, know your rights, never trust a handshake from someone in a blazer unless it comes with paperwork, and most of all, don't let a company make you forget your worth. At first I thought maybe 1 or 2 students might listen, but by the 3rd week, a dozen were showing up early. A few even asked if I could help them prep for interviews or walk them through their first union contract. I wasn't just fixing machines anymore, I was helping fix the people who'd someday work with them. And that felt like something real. Back at home, Marlene noticed the change. "You're smiling more," she said one evening, handing me a cold lemonade. "Am I?" "Yeah, like you finally stepped out of the storm." I thought about it for a moment. "I guess I have," I said, "and I think I want to build something that lasts longer than a paycheck." She grinned. "Then you better get started, Mr. Boone." I looked out at the fading sun and realized I already had. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when I heard the knock. The shop had just opened. The air still smelled like cold steel and WD-40. I had a group of students huddled around a broken boiler unit, their notebooks open and brows furrowed as I guided them through troubleshooting steps. The knock wasn't loud, just 2 quiet taps on the metal side door, the kind that makes you pause, not from fear but from something heavier, a memory rising without warning. I excused myself and crossed the floor. When I opened the door, I froze. It was Ben. Grey suit, wrinkled and too loose on his frame, hair slicked back. Though the corners had started to thin, he looked nothing like the confident executive I remembered. His face was hollow, his eyes bloodshot, his shoulders hunched forward like a man who had spent the last year trying not to collapse. "Harold," he said, almost a whisper, "can we talk?" For a moment, all I could hear were the clinks of tools behind me, and then my own heartbeat. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. We stood under the cloudy sky, the smell of machine grease in the air. Ben shifted his weight uncomfortably. "I heard what you've been doing. The school, the classes, the settlement, word travels." I said nothing. "I just wanted to say I was wrong," he continued. "Back then, about everything." I watched him carefully. He wasn't making excuses, but he wasn't quite taking full responsibility either. "Not yet. You fired me to protect a thief," I said flatly. "You backed Marcus because he made you feel powerful, and when the walls started falling, you left me to rot." He looked down at his shoes. "I know." I folded my arms. "So what do you want now?" "I'm not asking for a job or money. I wanted you to know I lost everything. When Marcus went down, so did I. Blacklisted. Couldn't get a single call back. My wife left. The mortgage ate the house. I'm starting over." I let the words hang between us. Finally, I asked, "And why come here?" "Because someone told me you were helping people like me, people who needed second chances." I took a long breath. The old Harold, the one from 2 years ago, might have slammed the door and told him to shove off, but I'd changed. I had learned that revenge wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about choosing who you wanted to be, not letting the worst people define you. "I'm not going to hire you," I said. This isn't some redemption factory. The people I help, they show up early, get their hands dirty, and don't expect shortcuts. Ben nodded. I get it. But I added, if you want to enroll in the next HVAC training cohort, we've got open seats. You'd have to pay like everyone else, and you'd start by sweeping floors. His head lifted slightly. You'd let me, I'd let you earn it. That's more than you ever gave me. He reached out his hand. Thank you. I looked at it, then slowly shook it. His grip was weak, not out of pride but exhaustion. That night, I told Marlene what happened. You're a better man than I am, she said. Not better, I replied. Just tired of holding grudges. They don't keep you warm. She leaned against my shoulder. Still, you didn't have to offer him anything. I know, but maybe that's what makes it worth something. The first real snow came early that year. The rooftops of the town wore white caps by dawn, and the school closed its doors for the day. I took it as a sign to slow down, to sit with a hot cup of coffee and let the world catch its breath, same as I had finally learned to do. I sat by the window, watching flakes fall quietly over the front yard. Marlene brought out an old photo album from the hall closet, one we hadn't opened in years. Inside were snapshots of the life I had nearly let pass me by, our wedding in the backyard, the first used truck I ever fixed up, blurry Christmas mornings with nieces and nephews, smiles I hadn't realized were so rare. There, nestled between the memories, was a picture of me from last month, standing with my first group of graduating trade school students, 12 young men and women with grease-stained uniforms and calloused hands, all of them smiling wide. Some were heading to union jobs, some to apprenticeships, and one, a quiet girl named Janie, had already been hired by a local contractor who said she worked like someone twice her age. You look proud in that one, Marlene said softly. I am, not just of them, of myself. For once I wasn't defined by the building I worked in, the title on my name tag, or the hours I logged. I was defined by what I chose to build, and who I chose to become when the system tried to bury me. Ben came back the next semester. He started as a janitor in the workshop, never asked for favors, and kept his head down. I saw him struggling, fumbling with simple tools at first, but he never quit. By month 2, he could replace a compressor without flinching. By month 3, he was staying after class to help others. Did I forgive him? I'm not sure. But I respected the version of him that was showing up now, broken, humbled, and trying, that had to count for something. Midland Logistics faded into the background. The company rebranded, shuffled the board, hired new people, but I never cared to follow. They were a chapter closed, a lesson I had outgrown. What stayed with me was this: people will take from you what you don't protect. They'll rewrite your story unless you grab the pen. And the best revenge, it's not public humiliation, lawsuits or headlines. It's peace. It's building something no one can take away. It's leaving your mark on the world, not in profit margins, but in people. On my 60th birthday, my students threw me a surprise party in the shop. They hung a crooked banner that said, "Thank you, Mr. Boone." There was a sheet cake with my name on it spelled wrong, which made me laugh harder than it should have, and a handmade plaque from the school. To Harold Boone, the man who taught us more than blueprints, you taught us how to fight and how to stand. I looked around that shop, at the laughter, the sawdust in the air, the next generation I was proud to know, and I felt it in my chest. I wasn't just retired, I was reborn.